The theme for today's class is called Make Something Hard, Private and Ubiquitous. And we're going to talk about program as well as something I call post-cloud intelligence infrastructure, which covers about a series of topics on what is going on after the cloud era when we shift the focus from cloud-based data centers or cloud-based applications to your own to your local deployments, especially for big enterprises and users that really emphasize privacy during this time. But yeah, we'll get started with market news. So we have got three structures typically. One is the market news going on, as well as we're going to introduce who program is, and last we'll come around about something I called the post-cloud intelligence stack. Okay. So the first news that is coming today that I think is quite interesting is that Thinking Machines Lab is having another partnership and funding round with NVIDIA. It seems that NVIDIA company has been stretching its edge towards these neo labs, focusing on frontier research in AI. And I think this funding round is not just about giving you cash. I think at this point in time, cash for these large AI companies is no longer the key priority. It is actually who can get the access to this computing power, and somehow because they are monopolized, like we mentioned last time about EP2, because these resources are being monopolized by companies like AMD, NVIDIA, Oracle. So the priority of getting these gigawatts of computing power has become the key for when it comes to the competition in the research and in massive training. And like Mira Murati said, NVIDIA's technology is becoming the foundation on which the entire field of the research is built upon. And then if somebody checked the Twitter today, it's also interesting that Yala Kun, the previously head of research at Meta, also known as Facebook, after he was kicked out from Facebook company, he started a new company called Advanced Machine Intelligence today, and he was also raising from Jeff Bezos, NVIDIA, Samsung, and Toyota on building world models. I think last week it was Fei Li that raised another round for World Labs for World Labs company. And this week we have another World Labs company, World Models company, that is raising a fantastic round at a 3.5 billion pre-money valuation. And this is somehow showing that the VCs and the investors, they are trying to figure out, other than large language models, there is something new they can invest in, because we are actually hitting a kind of a wall of massive pre-training for large language models, and the scaling of infrastructure just simply can't really provide the same amount of increases in model capability. So you're going to see that from GPT-2 or 3 to GPT-4o, it's a massive shift. But then from GPT-4o all the way to GPT-5.4, even though it is also an impressive increase in the capabilities, but the extra $1 billion they invested in this field hasn't generated the same amount of improvements in technology. Is because of the training methods, and that is why they are looking for other alternatives. And the third news, which can be complemented with the topic on OpenClaw last week, is that Apple actually is creating somehow a little bit cheaper version of the MacBook, which is $600, but still I think it's pretty expensive if you consider that the chips they are using is actually a phone chip. So they are inserting iPhone chip into the MacBook, and they call that MacBook Neo. And the reason for doing this is not because they are targeting to the mass consumer market, but also it is targeting to specific on-device AI workloads. For example, just across 3 weeks ago, when OpenClaw, the moat bot, or we call that, like the little lobster robot on what went viral, Mac Mini, which is 2 times more expensive than this version of Apple MacBook, was sold out because people need to deploy it on their own local host in order to ensure the safety of the AI agents. And somehow Apple saw the opportunity to provide a little bit cheaper infrastructure so that it can have more users in China, in the US to just to deploy their agents or their AI activities on a separate computer. And talking about Modebot, Meta just today announced that they are going to acquire Modebot. What is Modebook? It's like the Facebook for AI agents. And basically, these AI agents, they socialize with each other, they watch videos, they post YouTube, and they even gamble. They even created their own prediction market, as well as something like a crypto market for AI agents themselves. So these little agents, they're already creating their own social networks. That is why Meta tries to acquire Modebook. But there has been a rumor saying that, let's say, out of the million users of Modebook, half of them are human, half of them are AI agents. But somehow Meta figure out that they should acquire Modebook and to have the founders joining Meta's superintelligence labs. So Meta on this strategy, and they are trying to figure out how they can build an agent-native infrastructure and interface. And we might start to see there is a gradual shift of these traditional software companies from building products that are being human-centric to building products that are becoming machine-centric, and just to satisfy the need for agents to socialize. But also we should consider that Meta has been actively acquiring a series of overhyped companies in the past 2 years just to compensate for the lagging behind in the model capabilities as well as the development. So that is why somehow they might just lose their pace a bit, and that is why they are actively reaching out and acquiring companies so that they can keep up with the pace. So this is also something we should attempt to interpret. And next is still about geopolitics, and we are making comparison between two governments. One is in the United States, one is in European Union. In the United States, there has been a Congress meeting on the export control extension to provide very strict conditions on foreign investment in US data centers. And also, the US government is restricting the access to the Edge 100 or B200 clusters. And so which means that the access to chips is now becoming a national security issue in the United States. And the same is applying to the European Union, where France and Germany are together trying to build mega data centers just to power their own sovereign computing infrastructure so that they can no longer rely on the United States when it comes to the need to train their own models. And they're also trying to move from the regulation on AI to owning all the infrastructure so that they can avoid dependency on the United States, given the current uncertainties in the market. So yes, we are seeing that sovereign AI is maturing from just a buzzword in conferences into actual capital allocation. And this map of compute is going to look like the map of alliances in the coming future times. So yes, I think AI has been politicized just as many technologies that has been going on in the past centuries, from railway stations to the first couple of computers on aeroplanes and energy sector. They were all part of a political narrative, and same is applying to AI. And lastly, the news is about security. And we are seeing there is incident that Russian-backed hackers has been breaching accounts of Dutch officials and journalists via phishing on the internet. And it was said that WhatsApp has the ability to secure the protocol, but on the user device end, it just failed. So we should actually start to think that the trust layer for these communications software is extremely vulnerable. And we need to start to emphasize that we are seeing a security burden moving from securing the pipes, which means how we transfer information, into securing your own devices and your own identities on your own devices. For example, in your phone, in your computer, even in your home, people can now get access to like cameras in your home can get access to the television if the television is connected to the internet. So simply encrypted message is no longer the best tool to secure everything. So if we look at this whole thing, we are seeing that from computing power to architecture to distribution to interface and geopolitics, AI is now becoming a full stack power game. I know everyone is being formal in recent times. If you look at so many founders talk about so many products, and every single day there is a new guy saying, yes, we have built the world's first AI company for blah, blah, blah. Maybe it is for, I don't know, social networking. Maybe it is for medicine. Maybe it is for client relations management. But this week's news, even though it's only been 2 to 3 days, it's saying something otherwise. So that's something we should notice about when it comes to seeing the bigger landscape of how this industry is evolving in itself. Okay, so now we're coming to our official session of the class, which is about program. We call that from news to philosophy. So before we build the future called by program, let's learn from someone who has been building it for 30 years. And yes, so who is Program? He is a person, he was the co-founder of Y Combinator, and he is also one of the most important blog writer and one of the most important teachers for many of the major founders currently. For example, the founder of Airbnb, the founder of Reddit, founder of OpenAI. They were all mentees of Program. So he doesn't really teach you, not only teach you how to build a product, he is training you how to look at the reality of the world without overly performative social fog. And I'll explain that in detail about what that means. And one of the important quotes for Program is that the way to get startup ideas is not to try to think of the startup ideas themselves, or else you will get very far away from the real problems they're trying to solve. It is to look for the exact problems. And if you are facing problems yourself, it is likely that others are facing the same problem. And you can maybe build a product that not only benefits yourself, but also can benefit others that are facing similar things. One thing I usually criticize on is it's like we're trying to find nails with a hammer. And what that means is that, yes, we have technology and people would just start to think about all kinds of weird applications currently, and they're raising very strange amounts of money simply because maybe one of them has got a stronger ability for tech. Maybe one of them is someone from Google, someone from Alibaba, and that's why they're raising $10 million, but to build a product that doesn't really work for the majority of people. And that is why I think in this time where many of the startup advice is mostly some kind of performance art nowadays, we should learn from Program to be more pragmatic. So what is his life about? Before he became a startup founder, he was actually a philosopher, and he studied philosophy, found it boring. So that's why he switched to AI. And then he started to write code on something called Lisp. I think not many people know what Lisp is. Lisp is basically the grandfather for Java, C++, etc. It's a previous generation of coding language. And at that time, most of the websites were built upon Lisp, which is something very, I think, complicated, but also it follows a very clear logical structure. And because Program study philosophy, and one of the most important training in philosophy is logic. And the logic means that you should transform every single word or argument you make into mathematical symbols. And this is how I think what we call a semantic logic works out. And surprisingly, this kind of logic evolved into computer science language. So that is why he can shift from philosophy to computer science at the time. And then in 1990s to 1994, he started painting, and he went to Rhode Island School of Design. He wanted to build things that would last, and that is why he created something called Hackers and Painters. So it's basically it's basically how his personality was formed. He was not just someone that knows technology really well. He's also a person that is particularly good at combining arts or combining more metaphysical concepts into technologies, and that will make him later on a major thinker in the VC world. And then he started his first SaaS company called BioLab, and he started to realize that this is something that doesn't scale. But because it doesn't really scale, it is facing less competition, and less people were actually trying to work on this field. And this was eventually proved to be successful when he sold the company to Yahoo for $49 million. And afterwards, he started Y Combinator, which is nowadays the startup factory for most of the great companies that we are seeing from the Silicon Valley. And this model of how Y Combinator works later on spread across the world to Europe, to Asia, and even nowadays maybe to Africa as well. I've heard that Antler is trying to build their own hub in South Africa, and starting from South Africa, they can spread across to Nigeria, to Kenya, etc. Okay, so just to dig deeper into his life, he co-founded ViaWeb with Robert Morris. It is the first web-based application that really allow you to build online stores through a browser. And it was one of the very first attempts for people to try e-commerce. And at that time, before the 2000s, 2005, 2006, e-commerce was already there. It was a rather new concept. And nowadays, we can link that with certain like browser for AI or agent makers, things that make building agents much easier. It's similar to building online stores through a browser. So they are basically both infrastructures for the wave of the internet bubble. And while the competitors, they start to write on the C++, ViaWeb was running on something even more, I think, older, which is the Lisp language. But this is much more efficient than the other languages we are using. So this speed was the unfair advantage against many of the other competing company. And they will say that the origin of do things that don't scale is that they didn't just build the software, they were also trying to build the stores for the first users to get them on board. So let's say I'm a client and they provide me with this software, right? I can pay them a certain amount of money, and they can just directly help me to build my entire store from their team side, to teach me how to use their SaaS model, teach me how to use their architecture and engineering, stuff like that. And once you gather, let's say 10, 100, 200 users like that, words will spread out. So at first, I think sometimes being a founder, slower can be better than shipping overly fast and growing overly fast, because you can't really serve each of your consumers really well, and you don't know what's the real problem there. Because by engaging with them really closely at the first couple of months, you will get to understand from the large sample that you get from these consumers. And when you get the feedback, you can start building products in a much faster way. Many friends of mine, the first thing they say is that they don't know who they can reach out to start using the product. And always I will suggest them to say, yes, if you're trying to build a product just for the e-commerce business in Southeast Asia, one of my friends is in Malaysia, why not just try directly walk into a store and just tell them they can build a website for them, and you can also build the logistics monitor for them, and you can track their data. You can use the data to train stuff, so that you do need to pay money for the large amount of data, and you don't have to worry about the barriers in front of you. So even though you think this thing doesn't really scale up, it is in fact in a reversal way. It can make you scale faster after you get the first couple hundred people that you serve manually. And in 2001, this guy started program.com. It's still one of the most popular websites for people to visit. And the person was great because he teach people how to be a good founder, and he also teach people how to raise money from venture capitalists. And before program, VCs just operate inside the doors. So the influence doesn't really measure in the amount of assets you write and the amount of visitors that actually look at your blogs. It is measured in the number of exits. It is measured in the financial rewards. But then he just managed to bypass the gatekeepers that's trying to build a barrier to this industry. And his essays were very nice cognitive frameworks that the entire industry now uses to think thoroughly about what kind of person they want to be, how they should build companies, how they should view their entire life. And I think every single day we can read one. I was suggested to read one program essay. Maybe as time compiles, you will just have much more inspiration from compared with many of the peers. So that is why I think program was one of the first people that managed to do so, and this was later on building the foundation for program to build Y Combinator, and why so many people are following him. So there were very much four important essays he wrote in the past. One I just introduced is you should do things that don't really scale. Airbnb did that, Stripe did that as well. And you should also, the second essay is about the maker's schedule and the manager's schedule. So that means that creators, you need half of your day being blocked instead of going out and having meetings all around. And because a single meeting can ruin your entire day. And I can assure that this is very true. Whenever I'm in a project and people start to have meeting with me, my entire thinking has been disturbed. And if you are in the very first days, couple of days in building something, just ensure that you're not interrupted by any person. And then he started to write an essay in 2012 about how to get startup ideas. Usually we'll say, let's brainstorm everything, and then let's connect the dots. Here we're thinking that just look for problems you have for yourself. And if you manage to figure out a way to solve the problem you have for yourself, maybe you can figure out a way to solve problems for many more people like you. And lastly is founder mode in 2024. And it is saying that no matter what stage you are in, as a founder, you should stay deeply involved in details rather than delegating it to a large amount of professional managers. This happens all the time after you grow to a certain phase, and your investors are gonna say, "Look, I know you're a founder, right? But you should step down, and we can have a new CEO." Or yes, we should not build a corporate structure to make sure our companies run professionally. But then you will see many of these companies are actually very mediocre companies. A very great company, many of the greatest, even until let's say NVIDIA, it has primarily been founder-led. The CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, has been and never been replaced as the CEO of this company. And by comparison, if you look at Intel, Intel has been a successful company on a monetary basis, but it has failed the AI test in the recent 2 to 3 years. The reason is because it is run by professional managers, not run by founders. And that is why founder mode was reintroduced back in 2024, just to remind people about how important it is to maintain maintain the founders as the key of your entire company, even though you're no longer a startup. So then in 2005, Paul Graham, Jessica Livingston, and his co-founder, Robert Morris, that built ViaWeb together, they built Y Combinator. And at the first time, they had 225 applicants at the time. 8 of them were founded. 3 of the interested people, one is the founder of Reddit, one is the founder of Twitch, and the other person is Sam Altman. That at that time created a company called Looped. And during that ages, Y Combinator was basically giving money $6,000 per founder. So let's say if you're a team of 3 founders, they'll give $18,000 for 6% of the company's equity. And that was a very initial term. And then all the way, they are now growing into one of the biggest incubator in the world, with about 6,000 company founded and more than $1 trillion combined valuation. I think OpenAI alone is nearly $1 trillion, and which is very impressive. Other notable alumni include Airbnb, Stripe, Dropbox, Reddit, Twitch, Coinbase, DoorDash, Instacart. You can still see Coinbase CEO coming to Y Combinator's incubator to give speeches or to give online podcasts. And also, in the meantime, these successful founders will come back to reshape the standards for Y Combinator about what kind of startup they're looking for. For example, Coinbase will say, I need someone in crypto. So Y Combinator decided to look at people in crypto so that they can build infrastructure that Coinbase actually needs, so which become a self-fulfilling ecosystem. And the very interesting innovation they had at the time is that they have built a batch model, which means that they recruit people twice a year, and there will be peer support. But there will also be peer pressure. And Paul Graham himself will be the mentor for all of these founders in the same batch. And then they have very standardized terms so that people can expect the same thing instead of negotiating over again. And then thirdly, they have the hacker-centric. So they prefer technical founders over the MBAs, and they prefer younger founders than the older founders, and they fund with Y Combinator's own money. So technically speaking, they don't really have very powerful limited partners that are controlling who should be investing and who should not. And lastly is that they are building a very strong alumni network. But what they're doing is that after you graduated from Y Combinator, the alumni are going to help you and with fundraising, with how to build the companies, with testing the products, with giving you advice. And this is creating a massive barrier that other companies can't really catch up with you. So that is why you're creating basically a Y Combinator empire. And this is a model that I think many countries are now trying to replicate as well. The same is happening in China. The same is happening in the UK, in Europe. And the same is happening, I think, in South Asia as well. And then we come to what is really worth learning from Paul Graham. I think the first thing is that see reality without social fog. So what does that mean is that we can look at the records nowadays in the AI industry. I think many people, they are these shiny, glamorous founders that are always somehow turned startup culture into a gala culture where you party all the time, and then it become a matter of social. Social is important, but social is not as important as building and seeing the reality of the world and reality of the problem that you're defining. So you should see reality without a social fog. Second thing is that I think big opportunities doesn't look sexy at first. They really look stupid at first. So you should get startups begin as a specific irritations, not the future of everything. And this is also against many of the new narratives going on in the current market. Thirdly is that you should stay close to users. I can resonate with that because one of the founders I talked to, his name is Peter Smith, and he built the first crypto wallet in the world, and it's called blockchain.com, and it's currently valued at $7 billion. We invited him to LSE, and we asked how did he get his first 500 users, let's say. He was saying he talked to the 500 users every single day. And so 24 hours, he just sleep 3 hours a day. 21 hours, he talked to users to get feedback so that he can improve the crypto wallet he is building. So this effort is later on helps him to understand what kind of future the users really want and make him outcompete with most of the companies building similar products at the time. And then we should have something called taste. Taste is not prestige. Prestige makes a product looks shiny and looks important, but if you look inside and try to use it, it doesn't really make sense. But then taste is something that you build and it become really important, and it become easier to use. If it's easy to use, if it's essential part of your life, then I guess this is something of great taste. And lastly is, in your early times, just have more agency, which means that you as a co-founder, you work 100 hours per week. Your entire team should also have the similar kinds of agency, instead of saying, yes, you are team one, you're just responsible for this. Afterwards, you don't have to look at that. And we are building procedures to make sure our company is in a strict way to manage. This is bureaucracy, and we should avoid bureaucracy when it comes to early stage startups. And lastly, I think one more thing is that you should be allergic to fake importance. What does that mean? Is that as a founder, you should always to make sure that the company you build is not prestigious. You should try to make the company looks useful. Just try to make it look useful, and that will be all. And the second thing is that money are actually hiding inside some very boring problems. For example, Stripe. Stripe just works on payments, and payments is a nightmare, especially when it comes to regulations. So when you try to make sure that regulations, when you try to talk with the regulatory people, when you're trying to bypass out all of them, when you're trying to negotiate with them, this is very hard work, and nobody really wants to do that. You do businesses that can scale easy, that can make money easier, but Stripe is eventually it just worked out really well. So our unconscious ability to ignore problems that seem too tedious is a human nature. But the biggest opportunities often look like the work that no one really wants to do. And also, one more thing is that, let's say Apple is not just a technology company, it's one of the most successful logistics company in the world. And it took them decades to build up a very complete integrated logistics system. So Tim Cook himself is one of the best person in managing supply chain. But supply chain is an extremely hard thing to do, and it's shitty. And you can also say the profitability for logistics industry is not as sexy as industries like finance, or working just on a SaaS model, or working on something, I don't know, derivatives, etc. But this later on became the biggest competitive edge for Apple company, because they are so strong and dominant in the logistics compared with other major hardware companies in the world. And lastly, I want to show you this graph. We know when it comes to being a founder, people will say you should do networking, you should do conferences, you should have advisory board, etc. But in the very early times, there were two things that are important for you. One is the code. Secondly is the users. I think I want to extend that not just in technology companies. I want to extend that to every single company as well. If you're a boss and you're running a shop, I think customers it's a cliche, but customers is the only thing you should focus. And the products, what you offer customers, and how you can maybe lower the cost of your things, how you can make them higher quality, how you can make sure you can promote the products, is the code that you're trying to write in the traditional industry. So it's something that is quite similar. And the founders, they just don't like bullshit, and they will remove everything that doesn't really matter to the decision making, so that you can have a clearer way to think about what's going on in the world. So hope that really helps when it comes to founding a business in the future. Okay, and then we'll start to talk about a new topic, that is the post-cloud intelligence stack. And what I mean by that is that we have been seeing a transition to cloud in the past 10 years. And we should admit that many of the major innovations happened on cloud. If without cloud, we might not be able to have a better platform economy. And many of the startups nowadays, they might not be that able to emerge, because the cost of data, the cost of storing data and managing data will be too high if you try to do everything locally. But nowadays, we should really think about this question when it comes to AI, is where do you want this large amount of intelligence, do you want it to live in the data centers of OpenAI? Do you want it to live it in a more private system? So what is I'm trying to define, because there are no similar words. I'll try to look for it on dictionary. I'll try to look for it everywhere. We haven't seen a clear definition about that. Some people are gonna say, "Oh, I know. This is edge computing, right? This is edge AI." I would say it's more than that, and it is clearly also not just pure AI infrastructure. I would define this as the market that forms when cloud remains important, but should not become the default place where you store all the intelligence, all the large language models, and your information. And we should make sure that intelligence will run across the devices, the operating systems, the browsers, as well as some trusted remote environments when it comes to training, when it comes to accessing very important information. And somebody really will make sure that we can have this distribution of intelligence not only in a centralized cloud system. Why do we want to do that? One is that the more useful AI is getting, the more it wants your most sensitive context. One example that we have already is OpenClaw deleting the head of AI email, every email information, simply because we give it the access to all your emails. And we cannot simply control every single agent. That's the first thing. And secondly is that we have something called prompt injection in this technology, such that you can control OpenAI to do stuff that you don't expect to do. For example, hackers or your competitors can actually ask OpenAI, "Oh, I want to know what is AMD recently working on." And if there is an employee that places data of AMD on OpenAI's infrastructure, with prompt injection, it will easily tell NVIDIA that, "Oh, yes, AMD is working on expansion into this area, etc." So once AI becomes useful enough to need our private documents, messages, codes, meetings, and preferences, as we are seeing in the recent times, the old cloud default model becomes a bit awkward because it will get to essentially the more sensitive context that you have. For example, our internal documents for the company, all your internal chats, as well as the code you're writing in your own during your work times and the meeting notes that you are having. And we as students doesn't really matter, but if it's a Fortune 500 company, this is something that really worries them, and that is blocking them from accessing to AI, and that is explained partly why there's a very slow adoption of AI on the enterprise level. Okay, so why this is getting important? First of all, I want to say that platform owners are now shipping local AI as a system capability. We look at three major provider platforms. We have Apple, Google, and Microsoft. And both of these three companies, they are now building this full stack system from application to AI system. For example, Windows has their AI Foundry, Google has AI Core and Gemini Nano, Apple has got their foundation models and Core ML, and then you go to the operating system, and then you go to the hardware. So Google has the hardware as well, Microsoft has the hardware as well, and Apple has the hardware as well. If the operating systems are starting to ship these AI runtimes instead of merely supporting the third-party apps, then everything is going to shift because AI just stops being just a cloud endpoint, and it will start become part of the platform in itself. And one research from Databricks just shows that 76% of the enterprise LLM users are now choosing to use open source models. The reason is because one is open source model don't really have the access to your information. So and you can fine tune your own open source model in your own devices. And second is that big corporates are especially concerned about OpenAI using the data to train. You don't want to, you don't really want to, let's say, defense technology company, you don't really want your information to be trained by OpenAI. And as a medical company, you also don't want your information to be trained by OpenAI, especially when it comes to the patient's data. So this is enterprise overall procurement behavior that we are seeing right now. Once these open source models become portable across local hardware, private infrastructure, and public cloud, and the location of inference will shift from cloud infrastructures to your computer or to your phone, and this will be much faster compared with the past. But then comes the question is, why now is an important time to do so? I said in the last class that this year we're going to see more problems with trust issues. And I believe, I still insist my idea about that. We will go to see the shift from trust OpenAI, trust Claude, to we should verify every single behavior, every single data transmitted to these AI model companies. And Apple's private cloud compute is going to redefine the problem, just for example, because these private AI just require stateless processing, and they will give you guarantees, and they have this kind of verifiable transparency to see where the information is actually held and how information is transmitted. NVIDIA is also pushing this kind of confidential computing into the GPU era with their H100 plus. Okay, so just now we were talking about how hardware is now mature enough, as well as there is a strong demand for safer and more private computing powers, and that is why I think this year we're going to see much more products coming into the trust infrastructures, as well as to build more private and more on-device local AI models. And then I'm trying to define this concept. I just call this the post-cloud intelligence stack. And okay, here comes my definition for it. Well, first of all, there were a couple of questions I think that are important to this theory. One is that what we're trying to answer is, where should we run our intelligence in the future? Should we run this on local? Should we run this on edge? Should we run this on private cloud? And secondly is, where should we store our data? One of the products I use is called Typelist. It just automatically converts every single word of mine into paragraphs so that I can read my notes in the same time, and I can record meetings. And what it really does really well is that it stores data only in my device on my phone. So it doesn't really store every single data on the cloud, because it knows many of the users are enterprise users as well. And then 30 is that who really do this kind of task routing? Like, what should be run on your local computer? What should be run in the cloud? And is there a system that's going to decide? Maybe this conversation with the AI is going to be run on the cloud because it's cheaper. Maybe the other one should be run on your local computer. And then who should be the one to verify if the system should be trusted? And lastly is, when it comes to distribution, is it distributed through apps? Is it distributed on browsers or chips or operating systems? So that's something that I'm trying to ask, and I think it's important. If one of the founders can figure out how to answer these questions, maybe it can be a billion-dollar startup as well. So basically, there are 3 layers to me that are very important on this new concept. One is how we execute, one is how we control, and lastly is how we apply. And execution layer is basically our hardware. Our hardware, for example, this phone is where we can run our models. This computer is where we can run it. And then we should, in between, have a control layer, which is like an auditor, which is like the PwC or KPMG for AI data, that decides how my data should be run. Is it going to be run on the cloud, or is it going to be run on my local device? And lastly, we go to the application layer to say, okay, we are now serving law issues. We're now serving medical issues. So this is an easy way to explain the infrastructure stack that we are trying to build. And maybe, I'm just saying, maybe the control layer is not lagging, is not lagging behind. So then comes the question of who decides how we should run this kind of intelligence. we call that the control layer. So you can send information from the confidential cloud to the control layer, and then it will decide whether or not whether or not we should transmit the information on the edges or on your own device. And whoever occupies this controlling is the closest person to reaching a new monopoly in the field. And then comes the question is, are there already companies that are building? And there are five kinds of companies that are competing for positions. One is already very saturated, which is platforms. And I think it's very hard for younger founders to compete, because primarily people are like Apple, Google, they are competing at the platform level. They're trying to control the entire execution layer. And then we have Mistral AI, Liquid, Ollama, and LLM Studio that are doing a great job in keeping open models portable and deployable. So what they basically do, the product and deploy that on your local computers. And many of the companies nowadays that say we are hardware AI are using these models from Mistral, Liquid, Ollama, etc. And then comes the question of privacy and trust. We have Opaque and Edge systems, so they can make remote inference usable for sensitive workloads. And then we are seeing companies like mobile and Edge, as well as in privacy native companies that is somehow in cryptocurrency field. Million is a company that is doing a particularly great job in cryptography and using cryptography to make sure a computer on the cloud is 100% confidential, is 100% private. And if anyone is interested in blockchain, you can also look at the recent trends going on Ethereum called zero knowledge proof, as well as called private blockchains. These are something really cool and interesting when it comes to protecting the privacy of your data. And yes, here are just some of the introductions to these companies. Ollama is, if any one of you likes to deploy your local models, I guess you will know that you always, when it comes to running everything on your own computer, you just install Ollama so that you can make sure that it doesn't really get access or send data back to OpenAI or Claude, which is something interesting. And we also think that one of the most valuable models nowadays should not be the one with the biggest parameter. In the past, we were thinking the bigger parameter we have for a model, the better it is going to be. But nowadays, since the larger the model is going to be on the cloud, the slower it is going to happen on your edge. For example, if I try to use GPT Pro on my little iPhone, I will expect an hour or 2 hours more time for inferences to solve the same complex problem than on the computer. This is something that we should consider when it comes to building these extremely large parameter models. So Liquid AI, Mistral AI, and Stellar Labs are trying to solve this problem. And we also think that these are the companies that are most likely going to build some deeper barriers when it comes to competition. One of them is called Opaque. Opaque is a UC Berkeley-born company, and their expertise is to build confidential AI platform. And they just recently raised 24 million Series B, and they haven't been noticed yet in the broader market because these concepts are relatively less sexy compared with, let's say, building a new social media company based on AI. I think that will raise much more attention from the general media. But still, I think if you want to act as if you're an investor, you can probably look into and try to assess companies like on this list, and you can keep track on them. Maybe one of them becomes a successful unicorn, and I'm sure one of these will become unicorns. Okay, and last part, we'll come to a question: how big can this market become? It's difficult to estimate, but there are some ways that I attempted. One is on the distribution pace. We are going to see 1 billion plus devices. So there are 1 billion devices that are going to generate economic value. And the second pool is going to be that the software and infrastructure attachment it's gonna be worth like between $1 to $10 billion yearly, but it depends on how we calculate the numbers. And lastly is enterprise trust and workflow. So I think Ground View Research presented a good point that on-device AI market will rise to 75 billion by 2023. Now it's just a little bit like $10.8 billion. So people don't really find it a very sexy business to invest into. But this is just to showcase that purely on-device the on-device market has got this potential. And the full post-cloud stack that I am raising here, it will include not just the on-device slice, it will include the verification layer, it will include the workflows, how to make sure the workflows are private enough. It will be substantially larger than 75 billion. And then comes the question, so are there VCs already looking at that and how they're thinking of this? So one thing being raised is Menlo Ventures report that the infrastructure is not settled yet. And this is creating a massive opportunity. And 76% of AI use cases are purchased rather than built internally, but we are going to see much more large corporations using their in-house built infrastructure. And I believe that purely using OpenAI API or Cloud API is just a transition. And eventually these large traditional companies will use their internal models, and this will bring up with a series of opportunities on building tools that enable them to build their internal models, to train their internal models, and to make sure that everything is safe. So when it comes to serving these large corporates, there will be a huge opportunity. And Sequoia is also saying that last year, one of the, I think, partners says, big enterprises are struggling to implement AI in-house, which is going to lead to fatigue and disappointment. And a McKinsey report I read previously in 2025 was saying similar things. The adoption of AI into their official workflows is stunningly low when it comes to creating economic value. People just use LLMs for chatting, but it doesn't really merge with the workflows, especially within the large corporations. And Qualcomm is also saying that the future of AI needs to be hybrid, with AI processes distributed between the cloud and the devices, not just about a cost issue, also about a privacy issue. And one perspective we should see is that why we start to shift from the cloud to your device is that cloud was designed to make things more efficient. But in very extreme conditions, for example, we can always see that OpenAI will face errors and failures if Cloudflare is not doing a great job. And in the recent war going on, Amazon's data centers, when they were being hit, Amazon Web Service were being hit, Claude just went down, which means that if we overly rely on this highly centralized infrastructure instead of our own devices, then disruption will become a systematic risk. And how would you trust, let's say if you're a big financial trading firm, how would you trust these data centers, right? And so yes, I think like Daily Porter said, confidential computing has grown from a niche concept into a vital strategy for data security and trust AI innovation. And we overestimated the ability AI produce stuff, but we underestimated the ability AI can destroy stuff. And we also underestimated the market size to protect AI from collapsing, or to protect AI from accessing sensitive information. So there is this kind of overestimation and underestimation going on in the market. And so last we will come to what's going to determine the total addressable market. And I think there are several questions that it's worth thinking about, which are under the control layer, under the execution layer, which layer will own the default entry point, and which layer will have the switching cost, which is closest to the workflow, and from what type of companies can build trust more than the other ones. Because in the three layers, all of them can start to build trust mode, but which one is the more sustainable one? And lastly is which layer can sustainably extract a take rate. So many seemingly large markets end up being just traffic tools. And I think many smaller markets and niche things will end up becoming very big. And so that is why I think even though we haven't seen much report on the field I'm talking about right now. Many questions are being unanswered. Many people will think that the topic I'm talking about today is still a very niche market and it's not worth investing in. I think this is not the case. And lastly is, I would say, the best companies will own distribution, trust, and context in the same time. And but I don't think there's gonna be one single winner take all company. There will be multiple billion-dollar companies rather than just one winner takes all market. So that will be different than what Peter Thiel think about monopolies. And I think regarding the different layers for trust and for control, it will be more defensible because it would take more time. Like Program said, it's a hard thing to do. And if we want to invest, probably try to invest in the hard things right now. So yeah. So yeah, we come to the conclusion that I think the opportunity is not that AI is moving from cloud to device. It is that intelligence should no longer live in just one place. And it's time to build the stack that makes sure that this new arrangement can work really well. And this is why I call this the post-cloud intelligence stack. And that, I believe, has real market needs. And if you look around, if you do some research to the people, unlike many of the AI fluff in the wild that makes me also feel FOMO when I feel missing out, I think this is a real market demand. And yes, thank you for listening to this class.